Hey boys, today we're going to be reading Mose the Fireman, the legendary firefighter. Mose the Fireman. Excuse me, I hate to bother you, but I just wanted to ask you if by any chance you'd ever heard of a guy by the name of Mose the Fireman. Mose Humphreys was his real name, and he was the greatest firefighter who ever lived. This is going way back now. In fact, this goes so far back New York City was so new that it still had a price tag on it. But seriously, this is a long, long time ago. It's even before subways were invented. Let's look at those pictures. Now, to begin at the beginning, Mose Humphreys was born in 1809 in a tenement on the Lower East Side of New York City, the same year Abraham Lincoln was born in a log cabin on the plains of Illinois. Anyhow, that winter there was a big fire in New York. Every fireman in the city was trying to put it out. It burned all through the night, destroying block after block of wooden houses. It was very sad. You see, they didn't have too many fire plugs at that time, so they had to pump the water right out of whatever river or pond or pothole was close by. Anyhow, just as they were putting out the last fire, there was a big explosion, ba-boom, that blasted the top half of the building into a million pieces. See the pictures? Now, most of it landed in the icy waters of the East River, and everyone who had been trapped inside was given up for dead. But not long after that, one of the firemen from Engine Company number 40 heard a cry from down by the river, and right there, lying in a busted hogshead among the frozen cattails, they found a little red-headed baby. Well, the firemen of number 40 decided to adopt the little guy right then and there, and because of the way they'd found him, they decided to name him Moses, after the guy who was also found floating in a river, although not in the East River and not in New York. And so Moses it was, although practically everybody just called him Mose. And so Mose grew up in a firehouse. He took his first bath inside a fire helmet, and they used a big coil of hose for his playpen. Pictures. Now, as you already know, firefighting was a very primitive operation back in the old days. To begin with, they had only one piece of equipment called an engine, which was really just a big clunky water pump on wheels. And because all the firemen were volunteers in those days, whenever the fire bell sounded, they would all stop whatever they were doing, run to the firehouse, haul the old engine out, and then they'd drag it to the fire themselves with ropes, which was no piece of cake. You see, it wasn't until many years later that they figured out they could get horses to do it. These guys were not exactly valedictorians. Pretty soon they'd let Mose ride to the fire with them. He'd watch as the fire marshal shouted orders to everybody through a silver speaking trumpet. "Man the brakes," the marshal would say. The brakes were the big handles that pumped the water. "Man the brakes! Watch that hose there! Step lively, boys! Can the mongoose!" And the men would pump up and down on the brakes as fast as they could, and this would suck the water out of the wooden pipes that ran along most of the main roads and shoot it out the other end. It was hard work. Well, Mose grew up fast, and pretty soon he was right in there with them, hauling the engine, and not long after that he was so big and strong that the men would just let him pull it all by himself. Now, the engine at company number 40 was called Lady Washington. That's George's wife. And that wasn't a more beautiful piece of equipment anywhere. Whenever the fire bell sounded, Mose was always the first one ready to haul her off. You see, Mose was never one to fool around with stairs. He'd just throw his boots out the window and take a flying leap right after them, putting them on as he fell and landing without a hitch. It got to where he could jump out the window, shave, comb his hair, brush his teeth, eat some oatmeal, read 3 chapters of the good book, and drink some coffee without spilling a drop. Mose was some kind of fireman. Now, I wouldn't want to give you the idea that Mose and the Bowery boys of company number 40 were the only ones fighting fires in New York. There were fire companies all over the city, and every company thought their engine was the best, so I guess you could say they had a little rivalry going on among them. Whenever a fire alarm went off, 3 or 4 companies would all race to the fire at once, hoping to be the one to tap the fire plug and have the honor of holding the hose and putting out the fire. One time, 2 companies got into a brawl over a plug while the very fire they should have been putting out continued to burn. Now Mose and Skicey, who was Moses' best pal, couldn't believe what they were seeing. They had to do something. "Who needs a fire plug anyway?" Mose shouted. "Come on, Skicey, let's go." So Mose grabbed a pickaxe and made a hole in the pipe itself. "Skicey, take the butt," he shouted. Skicey grabbed the nozzle and pointed it at the fire, and then Mose stuck the other end right into the hole he'd made in the water pipe and began pumping the engine brakes all by himself. The water shot out with such force that the fire was out in no time, and Skicey had to hose down the brawling companies just so he could tell them to go home. That cooled them off. Now, as you've probably already figured out, the Bowery was kind of a wacko place. There were live pigs running wild through the streets, rooting around to eat whatever scraps of food they could find, and whatever you turned, there were chimney sweeps and vendors of all kinds selling onions and whatnot, and there were guys with carts that sold steaming hot yams and fresh apples and baked pears dripping with syrup. I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. Somebody run down and get me a cannoli. And each of these characters would have a song that he would sing, like the guy who sold clams would sing, "My clams I want to sell today, the best clams from Rockaway, hey!" But the most popular street food of them all was the boiled ears of corn that were carried in cedar buckets by the white corn gals of the Bowery. One day as Mose was swearing down the Bowery with Skicey, he spotted a white corn gal named Liz. And it might be a corny way of putting it, but when she sang her voice as sweet as the corn she sold. Hot corn, here's your lily white corn. All you that got money, poor me that's got none. Buy my lily white corn and let me go home." What an attitude. But hey, this is New York we're talking about. Besides, it sold corn, am I right? Well, what can I say? Mose was gaga, head over heels in love. Now, the natural thing for a Bowery boy to do when he was in love was to ask his gal to go to the fireman's ball with him, but somehow Mose just couldn't get up the nerve. You see, without some big scary fire roaring around him, Mose was as shy as could be, and so he'd just buy some corn and be on his way. Well, pretty soon the fireman's ball was right around the corner, and Mose still hadn't asked her, but lucky for Mose, there was a big fire over on Delancey Street. That was some blaze, all right. The flames shot way up over the top of a 4-story building, which was the tallest building in New York at that time. And it presented some real problems for the firemen because they didn't have ladders that could go up that high. Mose was on the scene in a flash with the Bowery boys of number 40 right behind him. The building was covered in flames, and it looked like it was going to collapse any minute. Then, all of a sudden, they heard this voice calling for help, and then Mose saw her on the 4th floor, right through the burning flames. It was Liz, his white corn gal. Without even stopping to think, he ran over to a shipbuilder's joint and grabbed the tallest ship's mast he could find. Then, like the lunatic that he was, he sprinted toward the burning building and pole vaulted right up to the 4th floor. Well, what with all those flames roaring around him, Mose felt like his usual brave self. So then and there, on the windowsill, with the building about to collapse and the fire so hot that they were both sweating bullets, Mose asked Liz if she'd go to the fireman's ball with him. Well, what's she going to say? "I'd love to," she said, and that was that. That's all Mose needed to hear. He was so happy he couldn't contain himself. He grabbed Liz and was just about to jump out the window with her when he realized he should probably do something a little more civilized, what with her being a real lady and all. So, holding on to Liz with his right arm and the ship's mast with the other, he slid all the way down to the ground. It was a straight shot, no traffic. Oh, by the way, that's how the fire pole was invented. I'll bet you didn't know that, did you? You probably thought it was Ben Franklin or Tom Edison who invented it, didn't you? Well, it was Mose who did it. And if photography had been popular then, I'd show you pictures to prove it. Well, it wasn't long before the fireman's ball rolled around. Mose got all gizzied up for it, although no Bowery boy ever went anywhere without wearing his red flannel fire shirt. You see, you could never tell when there was going to be a fire, and you had to be prepared. But because of his love for Liz, Mose put a white dicky over the top of it, very classy. Of course, Liz didn't look so bad herself. She was a sight for sore eyes. The two of them danced all through the night. It was Moses' dream come true. Well, Mose wasn't one to waste time, and after a couple of hours of dancing with Liz, he was all set to propose marriage. That's all there was to it. So he wiped his mouth on his sleeve and he cleared his throat, and he said, "Liz, will you—" But just as he was getting to the point, Mose heard a distant sound, a bell, coming from the direction of City Hall. Being the remarkable fireman that he was, he could hear it over all the music that the orchestra was playing. "Fire!" Mose shouted with all his might. "Fire! Turn out, boys! Turn out!" With that, every man in the place dropped whatever he was doing and ran for the nearest exit. But by the time they got to the fire, it had already burned several blocks. It was the worst fire New York City had ever seen. Every single company in the city was there. Mose was up and down ladders rescuing people all through the night, but it was a losing battle. There just wasn't enough water, and the fire continued to burn out of control. After a while, it began to look completely hopeless. Mose sighed the saddest sigh he ever sighed. Gotham would never be the same. From where he was, Mose could see the Hudson River at the edge of the island. It was all so sad, all that water, and no way to get it to the fire. Then suddenly Mose, lunatic that he was, got a crazy idea. A cockamamie, nutso, wacko idea. Although somehow the more he thought about it, the less nuts it seemed. Without a moment to waste, Mose jumped down to the ground and grabbed the biggest shovel he could find. Then he rolled up his sleeves and started digging a hole in the general direction of New Jersey. Sisky just looked at him. "Hey, this ain't no time for chasing groundhogs," he said. "For crying out loud, what's the matter with you? The whole town's burning down." But by that time, Mose was already underground and headed due west. "Hey, Mose!" Sisky shouted. "Hey, where are you going?" "Where do you think?" he shouted back. "To get water." Well, that's all Mose had to say. He always kept his word, and Sisky knew Mose would be back with water just like he said. In a little while, practically everybody in town was standing there looking into the hole, just waiting for Mose to reappear. Suddenly there was a loud pop, followed by the sound a tidal wave might make, and then, kaploosh! Up shot Mose like a spooked fish with the Hudson River right behind him. Then, without wasting a second, Mose picked up Lady Washington all by himself and wedged her into the hole as tightly as possible. "All right, everybody," he said, "we're going to have to work together. Hook every hose up to Lady Washington. Don't nobody crowd around. There's enough H2O for every one of you bums, and hurry it up, because there ain't much time." Well, every company did as they were told, and the minute all the hoses were hooked up, Mose started pumping the brakes. He was moving so fast it looked like a blur on top of a blur on top of a hallucination. But then, all of a sudden, it happened. Water began to shoot out of all those hoses at once, and the pressure in each hose was so unbelievable that it took every single man in each company just to keep them under control. In fact, there was so much water coming out of those hoses that the fire didn't know which way to turn. It just freaked out. I guess you could say that the fire had met its match. Well, Mose continued pumping the brakes so fast that in no time at all. Every single flame and every last ember was extinguished. Bada bing. Just like that, it was over. Mose had saved New York City. The whole city erupted with cheers. Hooray for Mose! Everyone shouted, hooray for the king of the Bowery! Mose had done it again. Now, of course, this was true, but Mose was a very humble guy. He couldn't stand being the center of attention. I'm just doing my duty, he said. You see, when you're as much of a hero as Mose was, you do stuff like drain the Hudson River without blinking. It's just what you do. Well, people kept on cheering, and the noise was so loud that Mose had to scream his marriage proposal to Liz, who screamed back her answer, which was absolutely yes, definitely, no question about it, yes. And since everybody was already dressed for the occasion, they all went back up to the firehouse for the wedding, and that was that. Bada bing. Married. Oh, by the way, after Mose had gotten through with the Hudson, it took so long for it to fill back up that for weeks you could just walk right over to Jersey, which is not the brightest idea in the world, but hey, it's a free country. You want to go to Jersey? Go to Jersey. And as for the tunnel he dug, it just kind of sat there for a while. But after a couple of years, somebody got the idea of putting train tracks down there on account of it being nice and quiet and out of the way. And that's how subways came into being. Go figure. So I guess you could say Mose even had a hand in inventing the subways. But hey, nobody's perfect, am I right? Of course I am. The end. Love you, boys.